Well, thank you everyone for attending our session today, titled, you may not be able to do a self-assessment. And we're going to get into the PowerPoint presentation briefly, but thought it was, again, relevant given everything that is taking place in the last years, but particularly over the last month, the heightened awareness and alert that all of us are at risk from cyber attacks, and that the Russians are employing not just might with power or with weapons, but also utilizing a very effective weapon, which is cyber attacks, to create problems. And we can assume that those are going to be heightened and continue to be focused on critical infrastructure or critical companies that service, very important areas of ours, which include the Defense Department. And as such, kind of will lead into our presentation today. First of all, I want to thank everybody for joining this session. My name is Tom Leahy. I work with SureShield. We provide solutions to help with compliance, security, and what we call integrity, making sure that we're not working with bad actors in our environment. Been in the compliance and risk business for over 30 years, and I have on the presentation with me our CEO, Sanjay Kumar, and our CTO, Chandi Bilagu, who will help answer questions as we go through the session today. You may have also noted, if you were able to see that briefing from CISA, on one of the most important factors that they say that everybody should employ to help reduce attacks is something, I won't say as simple, but utilizing multi-factor authentication. And when we do go into providing a little background on what SureShield does and how we can assist you in meeting your compliance and security requirements, we'll want to note that all of our applications include multi-factor authentication as well to help protect you and your company. So let's go through a little bit of the agenda today. Not a lot of changes since the last, actually there hasn't been an updated town meeting either by the DoD or CMMC, but we'll kind of refresh what was last out there. And even in given that time frame, over the course of the last 3 weeks, it's known for sure that there's going to be a heightened amount of attacks coming at us. And you can assure that both the DoD and the CMMC at this point is not going to be backing off, making, let's say, things quote unquote easier. They're going to want even more assurances that those that are participating in the DIB are following proper protocols to protect any sensitive data that you may be managing on behalf of the government and of the DoD. So we'll touch a little bit on the most recent updates and why kind of the theme of this was you may not be able to do self-attestment on a go forward, and kind of where that source came from. What your current requirements are, your compliance requirements. We know that you have those today in order to work with contracts you have. There's many of the folks in the DIB that we've been talking to that are saying that they're seeing more and more, particularly with new releases, the needs and the requirements to submit their NIST 800-171 score along with their POAM and SSP. And those requirements are going to be more baked into the agreements or into the contracts, as well as much more better output coming where documents are being properly labeled as CUI to help you in that process. So we'll talk about current requirements, what the cybersecurity model changes were briefly, that many of you are probably already familiar with, what remains and what your company should be doing today, regardless of these compliance requirements, but in lieu of these compliance requirements, what you should be doing and how we can help you to meet those current and future requirements. We'll give you a little brief overview of our platform. We'll take questions. And then, as we have done in previous sessions, we have a lot of folks that are interested in trialing out one or more of our solutions, and we'll give you an opportunity to indicate as so and get you set up. But what came out of the most recent DoD town hall update back in February was the director who was talking a little bit about the overall DIB and what they expect. So as you all know, they have moved from the original CMMC, what I would call 1.0, to CMMC 2.0. It's highly unlikely that you will see any further changes to what they're calling those levels. So the levels were reduced from 5 to 3, and continuing to use the foundation of the NIST 800-171 is kind of the gold standard in security. Again, issues that they ran into and why I think they came back and made changes to what would be the 2.0 plan were twofold. One, they didn't want to overcomplicate it. And they also came to the conclusion that there's the NIST 800-171 is an excellent methodology for having good cyber policy and good cyber hardening processes. What was really leading to the CMMC component of this was the fact that there were a number of companies that had attested that they were meeting those requirements, and lo and behold, they weren't. And those resulted in, you know, some pretty significant attacks, some pretty significant stealing of very critical data, and what led to really having a more stringent process in place to assure that our providers are meeting those requirements. So they will continue to work off of that foundation, obviously, by putting more enforcement and more oversight into making sure that those requirements are being met today and into the future. So they move from 5 levels to 3 levels. At level 1, they're estimating that about 140,000 providers in the DIB will be able to do a level 1. And that level 1 is what they call kind of basic cyber hygiene. There's 17 specific controls that need to be compliant in order to meet that requirement level. It will apply to those that really are not handling anything that could be deemed CUI data. Now, on top of that, they had originally suggested that probably close to 100,000 or more will be at a level 2. That means that these companies are handling CUI data. When 2.0 was originally released, they had indicated that at the level 2, there would be a subset of those that fall into a level 2 who may just be required to submit a self-attestment that they're meeting the level 2 requirements or the NIST 800-171 requirements. I say that because they are essentially the exact same thing. There was not and still is not good indication about that bifurcation at level 2, meaning some companies would be able to do a self-attestment, and some would have to go through the C3PAO audit, an independent agency that will come in and audit and validate and certify you for meeting those requirements. On the last town hall, the indication was there's probably going to be more an exception than a rule, meaning that there will not be that many companies who are handling CUI that are going to be allowed to not go through an audit. So the basics that came out of that is you should be prepared, you should have things in place, and you should be expecting that someone's going to come in and validate that for you. Now, if you do fall into the area where you are just expected to do a self-attestment, either at a level 1 or that small majority of level 2s, the degree of who's going to be signing off on those is going to change. They're not going to allow what I would say a mid-level employee who's probably doing the majority of the security work to do that sign off. It's going to have to come at the highest level of that company. And as such, by signing off on that, you're subjecting yourself to the potential of a false claim should that not be true. And so it becomes more important to make sure that these processes that you need to have in place are in place. They are finalizing the new POAM requirements again in the NIST 800-171, what I would call current process. There was really not anything that could not potentially go on a POAM, a plan of action and milestone. That will be limited. So you can assume that there are going to be very few items that they're going to allow to go on a POAM. So it's important today that you really do your own assessments and understand where all your gaps are. And think about how many of those you can close before someone else is going to tell you they have to be closed, or at least know that you have them closed. And from a remediation standpoint, that time frame will be limited, meaning if you are allowed to put it on the POAM, you are not going to have a lot of time to remediate or fix that. You're going to have to get that in place. So they're putting more enforcement behind this. And I think it's also safe to say that while this new rule is getting finalized, they are probably going to beef up the enforcement on the NIST 800-171 as well, particularly with any new contracts that are put out there. And they've advised everybody in the DIB to do vulnerability assessments. Sorry about that. So what are some of the compliance issues for the defense industrial base? As you know, all providers working with the DoD obviously right now need to complete a NIST 800-171 assessment. Those scores need to be submitted to the Supplier Performance Risk System, the SPRS, and those need to be followed with a system security plan and a plan of action and milestone report. And that affects all 300,000 in the DIB today. We spoke briefly about the new proposed structure. Again, it's safe to say that this structure is not going to change going forward. You will have the three levels, the level 1, the level 2, and the level 3s. The level 2s follow exactly what the NIST 800-171 guidelines mandate. And the level 3, which will be a very small number of those providers, will come in with some additional controls, many of those based upon the NIST 800-172 model. So it's going to be 110 plus, but really for the majority of you and probably the majority of folks that are on this call, you're either going to fall into a level 1 or a level 2. And so it's important, again, that you go through the processes of making sure, even more so today, that you have these, that you're compliant with these different controls. So what hasn't changed, and what should you be doing, knowing that particularly with recent events, you can assume they're going to try to accelerate this enforcement as opposed to slow it down. So CMMC, as we know, will be implemented. They intend to release what I would call the new assessment process very soon. They will be coming out with the new POAM requirements, or what those may be. So, and today you're still required to submit a NIST 800-170 score to the SPRS. And as I mentioned earlier, it's very likely that if you're receiving anything that's an update or a new agreement, that's going to be mandated that that be provided. So best that you start the process of doing that if you have not done so already. And understand where your problems and gaps may be and work on getting those remediated. You'll be required to submit that. And on an ongoing basis, that assessment or attestment is going to be done required on a yearly basis. So you need to be prepared to have that modified and updated yearly as well, minimally. What else should you be doing? Obviously, you need to determine, many of you probably know, some are still a little confused about what level they may fall into, but important to determine what your maturity level will be. And if you handle anything that could be considered CUI, just know that you're going to be at a level 2, and it's fairly likely that you're going to have to go through a certification process. So it's important to locate, evaluate, and protect that CUI data and prove that you have those processes in place. And even more so, beyond meeting the CMMC or NIST requirements, cybersecurity hardening is going to continue to be important and an ongoing requirement. All the releases you see from CISA and others, even on the last town hall, was encouraging and telling folks you need to make sure that you're conducting regular, what I would call risk assessment scans of your environment, understanding where your highest risk problems may be, and having plans in place to remediate those. And keeping in mind, again, that is not a static process, because there are new exploits, new vulnerabilities that are introduced almost daily. So how have we adapted to help meet the new 2.0 requirements and the current NIST 800-171 requirements? Understanding, again, while security is the prime factor, you need to be compliant in order to be able to continue to service your contracts. So we've gone ahead and modified the compliance assessment tools we have to the new CMMC level 1, level 2, and soon to be level 3 requirements. We had previously done all that mapping across the 5 levels. We've now gone back and modified that to align with the 3 levels. And the important part of that is that you can do your assessments for either NIST or CMMC, and you're not going to have to do them multiple times, because we'll synchronize all that data for you. We've adapted to all the new numbering controls. We've added a lot of new, very, very helpful guidance content to help simplify what you need to do. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from folks that have been trying to grapple with just how do I approach this by using what we call our Compliance Shield manager or tool that has really helped them simplify understanding what they need to do and getting good handle on that in a very quick process. And of course, we've gone ahead and modified the crosswalks to meet the current requirements. We've also, because of the importance and also the criticality of exploits, for those of you who are folks that use our security scanning tool, we've also created additional information on how, beyond all of your vulnerabilities and the risk of those vulnerabilities, we've also been able to call out what these CISA known exploits. You may be familiar with those, but they're exploits that are put out by CISA on a regular basis, and they really are, first of all, directed to government agencies who have to look at these, and they give them a very what I would call fairly strict guideline as to when they have to remediate and fix those exploits because of the nature and danger of those. However, those exploits are not limited to the federal government. They impact any type of public or private business as well. So they highly encourage, they can't enforce, but they can encourage that those in those sectors understand these and put remediation processes in place to eliminate them, because again, you're going to be just as highly exploitable if you don't. And so we've actually helped be able to call out those components. So, how can we help you in this process? As I mentioned, we provide a compliance auditing tool that crosswalks to both NIST and the CMMC 2.0. It's a very comprehensive compliance module that can map and crosswalk to any different type of audit that you may have. If you're a healthcare provider, you may have HIPAA that you have to comply with. You may, if you're a financial provider, you may have certain financial criteria you need to. So we're able to limit the work in doing this by doing the appropriate. A lot of these controls have similar requirements, and we can provide those crosswalks so that you can do it once and meet the requirements for multiple different issues. We have software that you can utilize to help you identify CUI data in your environment. It's a simple utility that goes out on the endpoints, and it can identify any marked CUI data in your environment. And then, as we mentioned, we have continuous vulnerability scanning tools integrated with our compliance framework as well. So that will help you even identify compliance issues through a scan. And what makes our scanning tools so popular and so beneficial is that they're very, very easy to implement. They don't require what I would call the highest level IT expertise in order to understand how to implement it, how to understand what's coming out in terms of your vulnerabilities, and be able to then, of course, apply remediation processes to them, whether you apply them with your own staff or whether you're working with outside consulting groups to help you with that. But we simplify the implementation of this, the interpretation of it, and the remediation processes. And then, of course, provide all the different types of reports and documentation that you may need in order to meet your current requirements under NIST 800-171 and the submission of those compliance scores, as well as output of things like the POAM and items related to the SSP. And we do that through a couple of different product offerings we have under the auspices of ComplyShield, SecurityShield, and actually Hackshield now is going under the umbrella of SecurityShield. It's the CUI identification and protection data tool. It's an extra layer of security that you can place on top of the data that you're working with today. And then for those of you, it applies in anyone that's serving the federal government at all. You are not allowed to be working with what we call bad actors or banned vendors. Particularly, this is focused on Chinese-related telecommunication equipment that is banned from being utilized in any company that serves the federal government, whether that's in a significant capacity or in a small capacity. You're not allowed to use this technology. And so we have a solution that can actually go out and identify whether you have that in your environment and give you processes to move that out to make sure you're complying with those requirements. So with this, I'm going to pause briefly, and I'm going to give you just a quick platform overview of how SureShield is helping those of you today that need that need this help. And let me I'm going to go ahead and open up our platform. And again, what I've set up here is a demonstration mode to help those really focus around the DoD requirements as they are today, but to just point out that, again, our compliance tool can help with a lot of different things beyond this. And in this particular environment, this customer has been activated for both the compliance auditing tools as well as the security and vulnerability management tools. So we present that to you in what we call a dashboard and tile type grid, color-coded to help you focus in on things that you may need to target and focus on. So I'm going to start off by going in and showing you how folks are using our application to do their CMMC and NIST-related assessments. You'll notice I clicked into this control panel, and the reason that number was at 255 is it's cumulative on the numbers of controls that relate to the different controls we're looking at. So CMMC has 110, NIST has 110, and actually the NIST 800-172 has an additional 35 controls. We're showing that we actually have this applied to anyone that would be at either a level 1, a level 2, or a level 3. You'll see below here on the filtering criteria, at a level 1, at a level 2, Well, 17 of those controls are the level 1 controls, and then there's another 93 that relate to what would be considered the level 2 plus. So if I just wanted to take a look at the, let's just say the level 1 controls related to CMMC, I can filter that information very easily. It just helps me look at different ways in which I can segment and work with this data. I can even assign it or look at this at the point of, let's just say, a domain or an area that I want to perhaps be evaluating at any given point in time. So these filters help me simplify how I go about working with the data. Again, when it comes time to actually begin to do your assessment, it's as simple as clicking on these hyperlinks. And as I mentioned before, one will provide you information on the control, what the intent is of that control, what the answers to that control can be. And then more importantly, we also provide a tremendous amount of guidance on helping you understand through this guidance what you need to evaluate and do to help you appropriately answer this question, hopefully answering it as compliant. That includes best practices, implementation guidance. This comes from the NIST 800 171 guidance as is. We provide policies, and we provide supplemental guidance as well as information that says, hey, what was the supporting evidence that I might need to help me validate this? Again, based upon the answer to those questions, you have the ability to add comments to support your answers. You also have the ability to upload evidence to support that, as we said, like the supporting evidences. So, again, if you are answering something compliant, should anyone be asking you how you can prove that you're compliant, you'll need to have that backup evidence, and that is all housed and managed centrally within here. You do have the ability to distribute workflow. So if you did want to, let's say, just look at access controls related to CMMC and you wanted to assign them out to somebody, maybe one at a time or in multiples, it's very simple to just come in, take an action, and assign this to other individuals to help distribute the workflow. And that can be done both internally and externally, meaning if you had someone who was outside your organization that you needed to help answer a few questions, you can send out a request for response. They will get a secure web form that will allow them to go in and answer those. And then in your dashboard, should you have any of those out to others, this request area will show you the things that are out. It will show you anything that might be overdue, that's in progress, and the like. So again, visuals to help you with this. As I mentioned earlier, we also provide policies that you can either take on for yourself. They're, I would say, white labeled to your particular organization. You can look at those policies. If you've started the process, you'll note here that several policies have different, what I would call controls related to those policies. So the access control actually has 22 different controls. So I can actually, see whether I have compliance issues with that, and if so, where specifically are those compliance issues. So you can see of these 22, I have 19 that are compliant and 3 of them that are not compliant. And if I were to hit this hyperlink, it would take me right to those 3 controls. So it really helps, again, streamline that process. As it relates to the policy, as I mentioned, we create uploaded templates that are mapped to those controls. You can see here, if I were to click here, it will show me all the controls this is mapped to. You'll see it's been customized to this particular company. And you'll also note, should you have your own policies or you want to edit this for your own specific purposes, you can do so. And then those will get reflected in your version of this application. Of course, if you do any editing, all the previous versions and the revision history will be cataloged and noted as well. So we really, again, have had folks tell us how much this has simplified the process and more importantly, help them get an initial, if they haven't done this in a while or they've been really trying to get themselves up to speed, it allows them to identify where those gaps may be and what they need to close. And again, that comes through all the different types of reports that can be generated out of here. So you'll have reports on compliance that will allow you to run based upon the different types of controls or the different mediums that you're working with. If I were to run this, it's going to show me my CMMC report on compliance. And again, these are continuous in nature, meaning that you'll always see the most current update, and you'll also see how things have changed over time as you've run these particular reports. Additionally, you'll also have the DFARS reports you'll need for your current requirements. That includes the system security plans, plan of action and milestone reports that would run out of this, and of course, also the NIST 800-171 assessment scores that will be run as well. And you can assume there will be a similar scoring methodology for CMMC. So we're confident that that will already have been built in for you. So that is what we call the compliance shield and how we help with the compliance auditing side. On the vulnerability side, we have a solution that allows you, again, to very easily launch what we call think of it as a friendly hacker. It will come in and identify within your environment where you have issues, where you have vulnerabilities. It will classify them by the degree of risk. And then it will also point to you the process for how you go about remediating that information. And you'll be able to see from the reporting perspective what the impact of that is over time as you go ahead and apply remediations as well. So this is giving me a view again in a couple of different methodologies, meaning different ways that I can look at this data. I've got, in this case, I have 273 host assets that are running about 3,000 different services on them. Services could be software or ports or the likes. And then the vulnerabilities that are associated with all of those. You'll also see, as I mentioned before, we've called out the CISA known exploits. So you can come in here to see which ones are in there and what required fixes as well. If I just wanted to look at the items, for instance, that required the most urgent attention, I've gone in and I've filtered on that. In this case, I can go into this because it's a host. I can look at what that host asset is saying. It will show me over time, because it's a solution that runs on a regular basis, how things have changed over time in terms of my risk on this particular asset at the asset level. And then it will show me, in this case, because it was a host, the services that are running on this, and then the associated vulnerabilities, and more importantly, the remediations that need to be applied in order to fix these problems, right? So down here, this would be the remediation plans. You can do that at both a macro and then at a micro level. So again, with reporting tools that you'll have, you can very simply and easily come in and run reports that can show you what impact and what issues you have as it relates to risk and how to go about remediating those risks. So for instance, we know that because there's so many vulnerabilities out there, you may not be able to attack everything at once. How can we help you better understand, how to segment this down to allow you to get the biggest bang for your buck? So in this case, I'm going to run a top 20 remediation report and suggestions report, and it will quickly tell me, very quickly, in summary on the top remediations, what are those? What are the critical ones, from the critical to the lower risk? If I had applied 20 remediations to 161 hosts, the impact would be a 92% reduction in my vulnerabilities and a 93% improvement in my overall security risk. And excellent reports that can show you the impact of those remediations as you apply them, not only on reducing your risk exploits, but also in helping you understand the amount of time that you may need to do to help take those actions and remediations. I'm going to go into a couple more solutions very briefly, but before I do so, as we mentioned, and sometimes we run out of time and folks don't get a chance to raise their hand if they're interested. We're going to launch a quick poll, and that poll is going to ask, as you view some of these product offerings, whether you would like to have an opportunity to trial these for free, any of these, and then specifically if you do answer yes or maybe, which of those would be of the most interest to you. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. We would appreciate you going ahead and answering it for those of you that are participating. You can move that information to the side so that it's not necessarily in your screen, but we'll go ahead and keep this poll open for all of you until participating today until we complete the session. So I just want to touch on a couple of other applications briefly that we have. As I mentioned before, we have what we call the risk, the CUI identification product under the auspices now of Security Shield, but the product offering was called Hackshield. And what Hackshield does is it goes out, it's an endpoint solution that goes out and can identify any type of sensitive data that's sitting on your endpoints. So you can direct it to the endpoints you want it to run on, and it will go in and identify any critical data that's sitting on those. I've often described this as an extra layer of protection, just like you would have perhaps with a safe in your house. Our security and vulnerability solution, Security Shield, does that protection. It helps you understand where you may have vulnerabilities in terms of access into your environment and to help you how to close that access. But in some cases, should someone get in, there's certain information or certain valuable assets that I may have that I want to even secure more. And that's what Hackshield does. It allows you to identify that very critical and sensitive data, particularly things like CUI, which are the basis for this whole NIST 800-171 and CMMC process, to be able to identify where that data resides and then put extra layers of protection on it to assure that even if someone were to perhaps try to exfiltrate that data, they would not be able to do anything with it because it would put controls, and it would prevent it from, it would encrypt it and prevent it from being open. So you can see in this environment, I have 139 devices that this endpoint is running on. It's indicating the amount of data. And again, as I mentioned, this can go across a lot of different types of critical data you may want to protect or have it look at in your environment. So if I was just looking at the CUI data, you can see we've segmented it down to that. And in this case, I can see that I have 57 devices that have CUI related data on it. And I, beyond the identification of that, I can also go ahead on in and set rules in terms of how that data can move, who can have access to it, and the likes. Lastly, I'm just going to touch on one other solution. It ties into integrity. As I mentioned, there's the requirements for that you are not allowed to work with banned vendors, right? That the Chinese government has certain telecommunication companies that they are not allowed to be, that you're not allowed to be working with if you're servicing any type of a government contract, whether that's the DoD or other agencies. And so we've created this 889B solution that really leverages some of the features of our security scanning tool, because one of the first things we do with the security scanning tool is a discovery of all the assets in your environment. And then off of that, you can program what it is that you want to run security scans on. But that discovery also discovers all of the different assets or IPs in your environment. And we know what those mappings are to the banned equipment because of their the manufacturer numbers that we have on those. We can very quickly identify those by MAC address and tell you quickly which of those you have in your environment, who they are, what they are, running it against this banned database. And trust me, it's not an easy thing to do because there's new banned entities being introduced into this. And within your own environments, there's oftentimes new equipment that may come in that you do not know whether that it actually potentially has that effect. So we can tell you very quickly, and this helps protect you from any kind of enforcement issues as it relates to that particular act. So in this case, it's showing me this particular device that we identify was banned is one provided by the Huawei tech company. And I can then go to that and figure out how do I remove that, what its utility was, and then how to get rid of it. So again, the poll continues to remain open. That gives you an overview of our platform and our solutions and how both independent companies as well as managed service providers are utilizing this to, one, help streamline, to help allow them to more quickly understand where they have issues, to do that in a much more efficient manner, and to do that in what I would call a continuous manner as well, because as I said, these things do not modify or change, will change over time. They're not static processes. So in order to be able to run this continuously, you need to have tools that can actually show you how things have changed as you make changes in your own environment and the likes. We provide it in, from the perspective of being able to implement it very quickly and to begin to get meaningful information out of it quickly to help you make changes you need to do. Ultimately protecting your business, protecting, our very critical infrastructure, and obviously from a business standpoint, assuring that you as a servicer of this, of the base, protect your revenue, put you in good positions to gain new revenue. One of the things that they did mention, and we should see coming relatively soon, is some incentives that they're going to give for folks to go through the CMMC accreditation process as they finalize at least that process itself. And so there'll be some incentives and contracts to do that. If you're trying to position yourself best to be able to get those, we can help you in that process. So as we said, CMMC 2.0, it's moving forward. Cyber hardening is going to be critical. The new assessment levels are in place. You can leverage technology, utilizing technology to really help simplify that process, to help meet requirements for today and for the future, and really to give you a comprehensive compliance, security, and integrity presence and system to support your business. So I'm going to turn it over for questions. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can always go to info@sureshield.com, sure-shield.com. You can visit our website to see what other tools we have in place. Want to mention that we do have a special offer that's running through the end of the quarter. Basically, those of you who are interested in starting a trial through this poll, or if you were to come back before the end of the month, if you start that trial on any one or all of our solutions, you'll be able to run that for a month. And if you sign on before the end of April, we'll take an additional 20% off of any of the annual fees that apply to that particular product offering. So again, the poll continues to remain open, and hopefully a few of you will continue. I see a number now have asked and indicated that they're interested in trying this, but we do have time for questions. You can go to this Q&A area. If you look on your toolbar, there's a Q&A section there. And please, feel free to ask questions, and hopefully we can answer those for you. And we'll leave that open for those questions now. And not seeing any come in yet. I actually see a few in the chat area. Randy, I'm assuming you're managing the chat. I don't know if there's anything particular that needs to be addressed in the chat.
It's being managed, and I think we have them all taken care of at the moment. But if we missed any, please let us know.
Great. And typical questions that we also get beyond the utility are pricing. I think folks will find this extremely cost effective. The compliance solution is really based upon what we call the frameworks that you are instigating for your institution. A framework would be something like HIPAA, CMMC. Keep in mind that we are bundling CMC and NIST together. So you're kind of buying two for the price of one. It's an annual subscription, and it's actually quite low in terms of that, and there's no cost for adding additional users. Our scanning and vulnerability management tool is really based, it's size-based company-wise. It's based upon the number of assets that we actually are scanning. And I'll qualify that. Scanning, not discovering. So we'll discover everything in your environment, but it's only those things that you opt to scan that have costs associated with it. And those costs are only associated within a month that you've run that scan. Now, a best practice would say that you should run scans minimally once a month. Some organizations find that that's difficult to do. So for instance, if they were only doing it every other month and using that time in between to remediate, they would only be charged for the month that they ran that particular scan. And those scans can be run as often as they like in that particular month. So we have a number that employ in a beginning of the month scan, identify the vulnerabilities, begin to do remediation on those, and then run a scan within that given month to see how they've improved their risk. And in that case, they are not incurring any additional fees for running that scan as well. An excellent question. One of the questions, and Chandi is going to type an answer to this, but the question was around whether this is suitable for registered practitioners and consultants that are servicing multiple clients. The answer is yes. We actually have several RPOs and RPs who have multiple clients that they're working with. So that's, the setup for that, for the person who is asking that question, we have what we call it's a multiple environment. We call it a partner environment, and it allows you to manage multiple clients in one centralized area. So again, yes, we have those that have the need that are servicing, and then those, in some cases, we have those single entities that feel that they have the resources, or they want to at least begin the process of doing their own assessment before they determine where they might need to go get more help. But we service in both fashions. So happy to speak to the person who'd asked about that. Randy, I'm going to have you answer this question if you're available. Because Randy and I work together as we do these sessions. We've set up clients that are hundreds, thousands of employees to two-person shops. So the question was, is ComplyShield suitable for a single, very small DIB, less than 30 employees?
Yes, it absolutely is. We have quite a few clients who are very small shops, some of them even just one-person shops. So very easy to set up. It takes just a few minutes. The more users you have, then you have to add a user for each person at your system that you want to be able to use it. And that would be the only additional time. And adding a user only takes about a minute all by itself. So
Yeah.
very easy. And we have quite a few small companies as well as large companies.
Yes, and they indicate that part of that is, I would say that we take some of the difficulty in understanding out of the process with a lot of the guidance that we provide to you. Either way, there's, you need to review that and make sure that you understand those, but we try to help give a lot of good information that can almost be like some consultative advice on what you need to do. Again, sometimes implementing things may require you to reach out and have others come in and help you do that, but it's very, very suitable for companies of any size. And I think we're getting close to the end of our time. If there's any other questions, we have about another 8 minutes to go. Again, we'll leave the poll open a little bit longer before we close. For those that you remain, if you haven't answered the poll, please do so. Even if that answer is no and no interest, that would be great. Actually, everybody that's answering right now is either indicating that they have a need or they may have a need later, which is great. And then one of the other questions I see is coming, and Chandi's answering this. The trial does not require you to install anything for any of your employees. It's a secure web-hosted solution. If you're running what I would call security scans or vulnerability scans, there is a small utility that needs to be applied on a Windows machine, and that can go out and reach anything in a network if you are within a network. And there's also a remote scanning solution. If all those employees were remote and weren't connected, then there's a small utility they would put on the machine to actually run the security and vulnerability scan. All the other solutions are web hosted, like the ComplyShield solution is a web hosted product. So it's simply turned on. We set you up with a secure way to access it, and then you can go in and run it off the web, run it in a cloud-based environment. So I hope that helped answer that question. And a great question, I think, if you don't mind me saying, Simon, please touch base with us. We've had a lot of folks like yourself that have been concerned about the costs of running our compliance solution, identifying and doing all the necessary things to assure you're in compliance. I can tell you we have a one-person shop that she's already purchased because it was that cost effective for her. It is, only a couple of $100 max a month to run the compliance solution, and that is a regular, continuous process. So please feel free to get in touch with us, and we can show that to you and show you that this is not going to break the bank. And actually, next month, even with one of our partners that does provide other services, we're going to run a session, keep an eye out for it, on CMMC doesn't need to be expensive, and here's why, and here's how. Super. So appreciate all of you that have participated. For those of you that have indicated that you would like to be followed up, keep an eye out for a follow-up message, and we'll work on getting you set up for your trial of whatever it is you would like to work with. For those that have said that have either participated on the session and weren't interested or interested later, all of you can keep an eye out for an email that you'll get with access to this content, as well as access to the webinar itself, the audio of this webinar. Again, thank you everybody for your time and participation in our session here today. We hope and wish you all the best. Stay safe and stay protected, and hopefully we can help you with that process. All the best. We'll go ahead and conclude the session now.